German prison of war, women were shocked when black American soldiers showed them their skills. I press my forehead against the cold train window, watching endless fields of white snow roll past. The rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks has become a haunting melody during our long journey north. My stomach churns with each mile, not from the motion, but from the gnawing fear of what awaits us. "They say the Americans are brutal, especially the black ones," whispers Greta, her voice barely audible over the train's constant rumble. She sits across from me, her face pale and drawn. "My brother told me stories." I pull my thin blanket tighter around my shoulders, trying to stop my hands from trembling. The other women in our car huddle together in small groups, sharing hushed conversations that echo the same fears. We are 15 in total, all from our medical unit that was captured in Sicily. The memory of that day still burns, the chaos, the gunfire, and then the sudden silence of surrender. "Quiet," I snap at Greta, harsher than I intended. "We don't know what's true anymore." But even as I say it, I feel the weight of our propaganda training pressing down on me. Years of lectures about American savagery swirl in my mind, mixing with exhaustion from days of travel. The winter landscape outside offers no comfort. America looks alien to me, vast and empty, nothing like our neat German countryside. Farmhouses stand isolated in the distance, looking abandoned in the stark whiteness. The cold seeps through the train car's metal walls despite our huddled bodies. "What do you think they'll do to us, Elsa?" Maria asks from the bench behind me. Her voice quivers like a child's. She's the youngest of our group, barely 20. I turn to face her, seeing my own terror reflected in her eyes. "We are protected by international law," I say, reciting what little I know about prisoner rights. "We are medical personnel. They must treat us accordingly." The words sound hollow even to me. The train takes a sharp curve, and we all lean with the motion. Someone starts crying softly in the back of the car. I recognize Helga's muffled sobs. She hasn't stopped worrying about her children back home since we were captured. "Look," Greta suddenly points through the window. "I think we're getting close." My heart pounds as I spot military vehicles in the distance. More buildings appear, then the unmistakable silhouette of watchtowers rising against the gray sky. The train begins to slow, its brakes screeching against the frozen rails. Camp McCoy. The name had meant nothing to us yesterday, but now it looms in our minds like a death sentence. As we crawl to a stop, I catch glimpses of armed guards and barbed wire fencing that seems to stretch endlessly. "Mein Gott," someone whispers. The train shudders to a halt with a final groan of metal. We sit in terrified silence, no one daring to move. Through the windows, I can see soldiers approaching our car. My throat tightens as I spot their dark faces, the black American soldiers we were warned about. Greta grabs my hand, her fingers ice cold. "Everything they told us," she breathes, "about what they do to prisoners." The door to our train car slides open with a bang that makes us all jump. Cold winter air rushes in, carrying with it the weight of our uncertain future. We clutch our meager belongings closer, each woman lost in her private horror of what might come next. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. I stepped off the train, my legs wobbling from the long journey. The bitter Wisconsin wind hit my face like a slap, and I pulled my thin coat tighter around my shoulders. Above us, guard towers pierced the gray winter sky, their dark silhouettes a stark reminder of our captivity. The snow crunched under my feet as I followed the other women through the imposing gates of Camp McCoy. My heart pounded against my ribs. Everything I'd been taught about American soldiers, especially the black ones, echoed in my mind. I'd heard stories of their savagery, their cruelty. We all had. Frau Weber clutched my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve as we walked past the barbed wire fences that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. "Keep moving," a voice called out, firm but not harsh. I turned my head slightly and saw a tall black soldier approaching our group. My muscles tensed, preparing for the worst. "Ladies, I'm Staff Sergeant Daniel Collins of the 92nd Infantry Division," he said, his voice steady and clear. I blinked in surprise at his careful pronunciation of German words as he continued, "You are now under the protection of the Geneva Convention." I exchanged confused glances with Maria, who walked beside me. This wasn't the reception we'd expected. Where were the shouts? The rough handling? The degradation we'd been warned about? Sergeant Collins maintained a professional distance as he explained the camp's rules. "You will be provided with adequate food, medical care, and shelter. You have the right to keep your personal belongings, within reason. Any questions?" None of us spoke. I watched him carefully, trying to reconcile this calm, dignified man with the monsters we'd been warned about. His uniform was crisp and neat, his posture straight but not threatening. When Frau Weber stumbled in the snow, he reached out to steady her, a gesture so natural and gentle it made me question everything I'd been taught. We arrived at our barracks, a long wooden building that looked basic but solid. Inside, there were rows of bunks with clean blankets and even small footlockers for our belongings. I set my small bag down on an assigned bed, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Dinner will be served at 1800 hours, Sergeant Collins informed us. "There's a wash house behind the barracks. If you need anything, there's always a guard on duty who can assist. You—" As he left, the women burst into whispered conversations in German. "This must be some kind of trick," Frau Weber muttered, unpacking her few possessions with shaking hands. "Did you see how he helped you up?" I couldn't help asking. "That's not what we were told to expect." "They're trying to fool us, Elsa," Maria warned, her voice low. "Don't let your guard down." I nodded, but something didn't add up. I carefully arranged my spare uniform and the small photo of my family in the footlocker. The bed was hard but clean. The room was cold but no colder than what we'd endured during the war. We were prisoners, yes, but we were being treated like human beings. The thought was unsettling. It went against everything I believed about our captors. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Sergeant Collins's dignified bearing and respectful manner. As I sat on my bunk, watching the other women settle in, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. We were all holding our breath, waiting to see what would happen next, clinging to our prejudices like shields against this unexpected kindness. I stare at the pile of uniforms in front of me, my hands trembling slightly from the cold Wisconsin morning. The laundry room isn't much warmer than outside, but at least we're sheltered from the biting wind. The other women huddle around the wooden tables, sorting through their issued clothes with careful movements. "These rations?" Martha whispers beside me, clutching her breakfast roll. "They're real bread." She takes another bite, savoring it like it's the finest pastry from back home. I understand her surprise. We'd all expected scraps, not full portions of actual food. The door creaks open, and Sergeant Collins enters. My shoulders tense automatically. Even after yesterday's shock of his polite introduction, I can't shake years of propaganda from my mind. He carries a small wooden box, setting it down on one of the tables. "Ladies," he says, his voice steady and calm, "I notice some of your uniforms need mending. Let me show you how we can fix that." He pulls out needle and thread, his large hands moving with unexpected grace. I exchange glances with the others. Is this some kind of trick? But he simply picks up one of the torn jackets and begins demonstrating basic stitching techniques. "See here?" He points to a loose seam. "Just a few small stitches will keep it from getting worse." His fingers work the needle with practiced ease. My mama taught me this when I was just a boy. Said every person should know how to take care of their clothes. Despite myself, I move closer to watch. The other women follow, our curiosity overcoming our caution. He shows us how to reinforce weak spots, how to patch holes neatly, how to make our threads last longer. "Here," he says, holding out a needle and thread to me. "Try it yourself, Miss Schmidt." I hesitate before taking them, my fingers brushing his briefly. His hands are warm, and there's something deeply human about that simple touch that makes my throat tighten unexpectedly. As we work, Sergeant Collins talks quietly about his life before the war. He tells us about growing up in Georgia, about working in his uncle's tailor shop, about joining the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers as they're called. "Wasn't easy," he says, helping Martha with a stubborn button. "Still isn't. Back home, there are places I can't go, restaurants that won't serve me. Even in uniform, some folks look right through me." I find myself listening intently, my hands stilling over my mending. His words paint pictures of a life I never imagined, of segregated streets and separate water fountains, of fighting for a country that doesn't fully accept him. "But you still serve?" I ask before I can stop myself. It's the first time I've spoken directly to him. He looks at me, his eyes kind but carrying a weight I recognize, the same weight I see in my fellow nurses' eyes when we remember what we've seen. "Yes, ma'am, because sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when the people you're fighting for don't always fight for you." His words settle into the quiet of the laundry room, mixing with the soft sounds of needles through fabric and the distant bustle of the camp. I look down at my hands, at the neat stitches I've made under his guidance, and feel something shift inside me, a tiny crack in the wall of certainty I've built around my beliefs. I sat on my bunk, watching the late afternoon sunlight filter through the barred windows of our barracks. Another day was ending at Camp McCoy, and I couldn't shake the confusion that had been growing inside me since our arrival. "Here," Sergeant Collins had said earlier, handing me an extra blanket. "The nights are getting colder." His kindness made my stomach twist with uncertainty. Everything I'd been taught about Americans, especially Black Americans, seemed to crumble a little more each day. The past week had been filled with surprises. Our meals, while simple, were filling and regular. The medical supplies I'd requested for Martha's twisted ankle had arrived promptly. Even the heating in our barracks worked better than I'd expected. "Elsa," Agnes called from across the room. "Did you see how Sergeant Collins showed Maria how to fix that broken chair? Who would have thought?" I nodded, but kept quiet. The other women were becoming more comfortable, chatting with the guards, accepting their help. Some even laughed at their jokes. I watched as two of our younger nurses walked past the window, waving at the soldiers on patrol. "They're not what we expected," Hilda said softly, settling beside me on my bunk. Her weathered face held a gentleness I'd always admired, even if I didn't always agree with her views. "Have you noticed how they treat each other, these Buffalo Soldiers?" I had noticed. The way they worked together, their easy camaraderie, the respect in their voices when they spoke. To one another, it was nothing like what we'd been told. "I saw them training yesterday," Hilda continued, folding her hands in her lap. "They work twice as hard as the white soldiers, yet their own men treat them differently. It reminds me of—" "Don't," I cut her off, knowing where she was going. I wasn't ready to draw those parallels. Outside, Private Johnson was teaching some of our women English phrases. Their laughter drifted through the window. Another group sat nearby, mending uniforms under the supervision of Corporal Matthews, who had brought them extra thread and needles. "You can't deny it forever, Elsa," Hilda said gently. "The way they treat us, despite everything, it makes you think, doesn't it?" I stood up abruptly, walking to the window. It's probably just for show, I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. To make us lower our guard. Is it? Hilda's voice was soft but firm. Remember when Clara was sick last week? How Sergeant Collins brought her soup from their own mess hall? Or when they gave us those extra socks before the cold snap? I watched as more of our women passed by outside, exchanging friendly nods with the guards. Maria even stopped to show Sergeant Collins her repaired chair, beaming with pride. I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted quietly. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing, Hilda replied, patting the space beside her. Sometimes questioning what we've been taught is the first step toward seeing the truth. I remained at the window, watching the sunset paint the camp in soft golden light. Everything I'd believed in, everything I'd been so sure of, felt less certain with each passing day. And that uncertainty terrified me more than any enemy ever could. I stand at attention as Captain Werner gestures for us to gather around him in our barracks. His presence commands respect, even here in this prison camp. The familiar glint of authority in his eyes reminds me of our duty, of everything we were taught to believe. Ladies, he begins, his voice low but firm, I've observed concerning behavior among you these past days. His eyes sweep across our faces, and I feel my cheeks burn with shame. Do not let yourselves be deceived by these Americans' false kindness. They are our enemies. I shift uncomfortably, thinking of Sergeant Collins showing us how to mend our uniforms just yesterday. The gentle way he'd demonstrated the stitching, his patience as we learned. It hadn't felt like deception. Remember who you are, Captain Werner continues, pacing before us. Remember your oath to the fatherland. These Negro soldiers, he spits the word with contempt. They're trying to manipulate you, to weaken your resolve. Every smile you return, every word of gratitude you offer, it's a betrayal of everything we stand for. My stomach churns. I think of the extra bread Sergeant Collins slipped to Hilda when she was ill last week, the way he speaks to us with respect we never expected from our captors. The kindness in his eyes seems genuine, yet Captain Werner's words strike deep, awakening the guilt I've been trying to suppress. They want to corrupt your minds, the captain warns, make you forget about our great cause. But we are Germans. We are superior. Never forget that. I notice some of the women nodding while others stare at the floor. Maria, who just yesterday had laughed at one of the American soldiers' jokes, now looks ashamed. I feel the weight of Captain Werner's words pressing down on us all. If I see any more of this friendly behavior, he warns, there will be consequences. We may be prisoners, but we still have our honor. Dismissed. As the others disperse, I remain rooted to my spot, my mind in turmoil. Through the window, I catch sight of Sergeant Collins walking past, helping one of his men carry supplies. The same man who'd listened to me talk about my family back home, who'd shared stories of his own mother in Georgia. Am I really betraying Germany by seeing him as human? By accepting his kindness? I watch my fellow prisoners return to their bunks, their shoulders slumped under the weight of Captain Werner's words. Hilda catches my eye, and I see my own confusion reflected in her face. We've spent years believing in our superiority, in the righteousness of our cause. But here, in this camp, those beliefs are being challenged by simple acts of humanity. The sound of laughter drifts in from outside, American soldiers sharing a joke. I find myself drawn to the window again, torn between the urge to smile at their camaraderie and Captain Werner's stern warning echoing in my head. What kind of loyalty demands we reject kindness? What sort of superiority requires us to hate those who show us compassion? These questions gnaw at me as I watch my fellow prisoners wrestle with their own doubts. Some have already begun to withdraw, their faces hardening into masks of indifference. Others seem lost, caught between what we were taught and what we're experiencing. I press my hand against the cold window glass, feeling as trapped by my own conflicting thoughts as I am by these camp walls. I stand near the kitchen counter, watching Sergeant Collins' hands move with practiced ease as he demonstrates how to make cornbread from the basic ingredients we have. The afternoon sun streams through the small window, casting a warm glow on the cramped camp kitchen where several of us German women prisoners are gathered. You see, when resources are scarce, you learn to make do with what you have, he explains, his voice calm and patient. My mama taught me this recipe during hard times. I can't help but notice how different his demeanor is from what I expected. The propaganda posters that once plastered the walls of our medical unit painted such a different picture of American soldiers, especially black ones. Yet here he is, teaching us how to create something nourishing from almost nothing. Here, try kneading it like this, he demonstrates, and I step forward, my hands hesitant at first. The dough feels warm and alive beneath my fingers. Around me, other women watch intently, their faces showing the same mixture of curiosity and surprise I feel. Back home, Sergeant Collins continues as he works. We didn't always have much, but we learned to be creative. He pulls out some scrap metal from a box and shows us how to fashion it into simple cooking tools. See this? With a little work, it becomes a spatula. This piece here? A whisk. My fellow prisoners murmur in appreciation. Hilda, working beside me, fashions a makeshift measuring cup from an old tin can, following his instructions. There's something powerful in creating these tools ourselves, in taking control of even this small part of our lives. It's not just about cooking, Sergeant Collins says, looking at each of us. It's about keeping your dignity, about making something useful with your own hands. His words hit me harder than I expect. Dignity. It's something I thought we'd lost when we were captured, something I was certain would be stripped from us. Instead, this man, this American soldier, is teaching us how to maintain it. I watch him demonstrate how to preserve vegetables using salt, a skill he learned from his grandmother. My hands move automatically, following his motions, but my mind is elsewhere. I think about the things Captain Werner said yesterday, about staying loyal, about resisting their kindness. But how can this be wrong? How can learning to survive, to create, to maintain our humanity be a betrayal? The smell of baking bread fills the kitchen. Other women chat quietly as they work, their faces relaxed, almost happy. I haven't seen them this way since before our capture. Sergeant Collins shows us how to weave small baskets from spare twine and paper. For storing your personal items, he explains. My fingers work the materials, but my heart feels heavy. Every kind act, every patient explanation from him makes it harder to hold on to the beliefs I once held so firmly. The things I was taught about people like him, the things I helped perpetuate as a nurse in the German army, they clash violently with the reality before me. The basket takes shape in my hands, crude but functional. Like everything else he's shown us, it's a small victory against our circumstances, a tiny piece of control returned to us. I look at my creation, then at Sergeant Collins as he helps Maria with her weaving, and I feel something shift inside me. His kindness is like water wearing away at a stone, slowly but surely eroding the walls I've built around my heart. But with that erosion comes guilt, heavy, suffocating guilt about my past, about the things I've done, the beliefs I held. The basket in my hands suddenly feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. I stood among my fellow prisoners in our barracks, trying to keep my face neutral as Captain Werner paced before us. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. His boots made sharp, deliberate sounds with each step. "Remember who you are," he said, his voice carrying that familiar commanding tone that had once filled me with pride. Now, it just made my stomach clench. These Americans, especially these black soldiers, they want to weaken our resolve. Their kindness is nothing but a trick. I watched the other women's faces. Some nodded, but others, like Martha, usually so quiet, looked troubled. To my surprise, Martha cleared her throat and took a small step forward. "With respect, Captain," she said, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "I don't believe that anymore." The room fell silent. Even the usual creaking of the old barracks seemed to stop. Captain Werner's face darkened. "What did you say?" "These men, the black soldiers, they've shown us nothing but dignity," Martha continued. Her hands were shaking, but her chin was lifted. "Sergeant Collins taught me how to repair my boots yesterday. He didn't have to do that. None of them have to treat us with such humanity." I felt my heart racing as other women began to nod. Hilda, standing next to me, squeezed my hand. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Captain Werner's voice rose. "You're falling for their manipulation. Have you forgotten everything? Our cause? Our cause?" This time it was Greta who spoke up. "Our cause is why we're here, Captain. And since we've been here, these men, these Americans you want us to hate, have shown us more respect than—" She trailed off, but we all knew what she meant. I watched Captain Werner's face turn red with fury. "This is treasonous talk. You're German women. We're human beings," Martha cut in softly. "Maybe it's time we started seeing others as human beings, too." The meeting dissolved shortly after, with Captain Werner storming out, leaving us in a strange mixture of fear and relief. Some women huddled together, whispering, while others sat alone, lost in thought. Later that evening, I found myself walking back from the washroom when I encountered Sergeant Collins. He was doing his usual rounds, and the sight of him no longer filled me with the dread it once had. "Evening, Miss Schmidt," he said, touching his cap politely. His eyes were kind, as always. "Good evening, Sergeant," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He studied my face for a moment. "I heard there was some commotion in the women's barracks earlier." I nodded, not sure how to explain what had happened. "You know," he said gently, "sometimes the hardest battles we fight are with our own beliefs." He paused, then asked, "Are you ready to learn some more of those skills we talked about? Might help take your mind off things." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man whom my country had taught me to hate, who had shown nothing but patience and dignity since we arrived. The internal conflict still raged within me, but I found myself nodding. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I'd like that." The afternoon sun barely warmed the chilly Wisconsin air as I watched the supply truck rumble through Camp McCoy's gates. My arms were crossed tightly against my chest, more from anxiety than cold. Around me, the other women shifted restlessly, our breaths creating small clouds in the crisp air. "Remember who you are," Captain Werner's voice cut through the quiet. He stood behind us, his presence a dark shadow. "You are soldiers of the Reich. Do not let their false kindness deceive you." I felt my jaw tighten. These words, once so powerful, now rang hollow. I'd seen too much in the past weeks, too much kindness, too much humanity from those we were taught to hate. Sergeant Collins approached our group, his usual calm demeanor unchanged. "Ladies, we could use your help unloading these supplies. Anyone willing to volunteer?" Before Captain Werner could object, Hilda stepped forward. "I'll help," she said firmly. Others followed, Martha, Greta, even shy Anna. I found myself moving forward too, though Werner's disapproving glare burned into my back. "This is beneath you," he hissed. "They're making servants of proud German women." But as we formed a line to pass boxes from the truck, I saw no servitude. The Buffalo soldiers worked alongside us, sharing the burden equally. Sergeant Collins even made it into something of a game, calling out good-naturedly when someone passed a particularly heavy box. "Easy there," he'd say, his smile genuine. "We're moving supplies, not racing to Berlin. The work was honest and somehow dignified. We weren't being forced or humiliated. We were simply helping, being useful, being human. I caught myself almost smiling when Martha dropped a box and Sergeant Collins steadied her with gentle hands. Later that night, in our barracks, Hilda sat on my bunk. The kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls as we spoke in hushed tones. "You saw it today, didn't you?" she asked. "How Werner tried to poison what could have been simple cooperation?" I twisted my hands in my lap. "It's not that simple, Hilda. We swore an oath." "To what?" Hilda's voice was sharp. "To hate? To close our eyes to kindness because it comes from those we were told were inferior?" She leaned closer. "Look at me, Elsa. These men, these Buffalo soldiers, they treat us with more dignity than our own officers ever did." "But Germany," I started. "Germany will still be there," Hilda interrupted. "But right now, we're here. And here, we have a choice to make. We can cling to hate and suspicion, or we can accept the grace being offered to us." I thought of Sergeant Collins, of his patient teachings, his quiet strength. "I respect him," I admitted finally, the words barely above a whisper. "When he speaks to us, teaches us, I forget he's supposed to be our enemy." "Maybe that's because he isn't truly our enemy," Hilda said softly. "Maybe he never was." I looked down at my hands, calloused from the day's work. "But what does that make us, Hilda? If everything we believed was wrong?" "It makes us human," she replied. "Just like them. Just like Sergeant Collins." I stand at attention near the laundry building, watching the new group of German soldiers march through the camp gates. Their uniforms are tattered, and their faces are hard with defiance. Something in my stomach turns when I see the way they glare at Sergeant Collins and the other Buffalo soldiers. "Get back to work," one of them spits in German at Martha, who's hanging sheets nearby. "Don't take orders from these—" He uses a word that makes me flinch. I've heard that word before, back in Germany. But now it hits differently. My hands clench into fists as I watch Sergeant Collins calmly direct the new prisoners to their barracks, maintaining his dignity despite their obvious contempt. "They don't understand," Hilda whispers beside me. "They haven't seen what we've seen." The new prisoners spend their first day causing trouble. They refuse to follow simple instructions, mock the black soldiers in German, and try to rally support from the other prisoners. Captain Werner seems energized by their arrival, walking with a new spring in his step as he confers with them in hushed tones. During the afternoon work detail, I'm sorting potatoes in the kitchen when I hear shouting outside. Through the window, I see 3 of the new prisoners confronting Sergeant Collins. They're refusing to move supplies, their stance aggressive. "We don't take orders from—" one begins, but I'm already moving. Before I know what I'm doing, I'm outside. Martha and Hilda follow close behind. Other women from our unit emerge from various buildings, drawn by the commotion. "Stop this," I say in German, stepping between them and Sergeant Collins. My heart pounds, but my voice stays steady. These men have treated us with nothing but respect. One of the new prisoners, a tall man with a scarred face, sneers. "You've gone soft, nurse. Forgotten what they did to our cities?" "And what did we do to others?" I shoot back. The words surprise me, but they feel right. I've seen nothing but dignity and kindness here. More than we showed to— He lunges forward suddenly, shoving past me towards Sergeant Collins. In the chaos that follows, I see Collins take a hit to the face as he tries to diffuse the situation without violence. The sight of blood on his lip ignites something in me. "Enough!" I shout, and other women join in. We form a line between the soldiers and Collins, our former fears forgotten. Martha grabs a broom, brandishing it like a weapon. Hilda starts yelling in English, calling for the guards. "You're wrong about them," I tell the German soldiers, my voice shaking with emotion. Everything we were told was wrong. These men have shown us more humanity than... I choke up, thinking of things I saw during the war, things I tried to ignore. Then we showed others. The guards arrive, restoring order. As they lead the troublemakers away, I turn to check on Sergeant Collins. He's dabbing at his split lip with a handkerchief, looking at us with an expression I can't quite read. "You didn't have to do that," he says quietly. "Yes, we did," I reply, and the other women nod. We're not blind anymore. We see the truth now. The women gather around him, offering handkerchiefs and concerned words. Looking at their faces, I see my own journey reflected in their eyes. The slow crumbling of old hatreds, the dawn of understanding. We've crossed a line today, and there's no going back. I watched through the window of the infirmary as Sergeant Collins winced, pressing the cold compress against his bruised jaw. The sight of him hurt made my stomach twist with guilt. He'd been trying to keep the peace when those new German prisoners attacked him. Now, here he was, still showing nothing but kindness despite everything. "You don't have to hover out there," he called, somehow knowing I was watching. "Come in, Miss Schmidt." I stepped inside, my hands fidgeting with my apron. "How are you feeling?" "I've had worse paper cuts," he said with a gentle smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Though I appreciate your concern." Martha and Hilda came in behind me, carrying fresh bandages and a pot of coffee they'd managed to get from the kitchen staff. We'd all been taking turns checking on him, helping where we could around the camp while he recovered. "The garden needs tending," Martha said, pouring him a cup. "We're keeping everything running smooth, just like you taught us." Sergeant Collins nodded appreciatively. "You know what amazes me? How far you've all come. When you first arrived, you wouldn't even look us in the eye." I felt my cheeks flush with shame. We were taught terrible things. "And now you're learning new things," he said simply. "That's what matters." I sat down on a nearby stool, the weight of my past pressing down on me. "How do you do it? How do you show such kindness to people who—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Who were taught to hate?" He set down his coffee cup. "Back home, I face hatred too. Different uniform, same story. But holding on to bitterness? That's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." His words hit me hard. I thought about all the propaganda I'd believed, all the things I'd done in service to those lies. The guilt sometimes feels overwhelming. "Guilt can be a teacher or a prison," he said. "The choice is yours." I chose to let my struggles make me more compassionate, not bitter. That's why I'm here, showing you these skills, treating you with dignity. Because someone needs to break the cycle. Martha wiped away a tear. "You've shown us more humanity than our own officers ever did." We spent the next hour helping around the infirmary, listening as Sergeant Collins shared stories about his life in Georgia, the discrimination he faced, and how he chose to respond with grace instead of anger. His words were like a balm to our troubled souls. Later that evening, I sat at my small desk in the barracks, a blank piece of paper before me. For months, I'd been afraid to write to my family, unsure what to say about my captivity. But now the words flowed easily. "Dear Mother and Father, I know you worry about my treatment here, but I need to tell you something extraordinary. I found unexpected peace in this place thanks to the very people we were taught to fear. The American soldiers, especially the black soldiers who guard us, have shown me what true strength looks like. It isn't in hatred or superiority. It's in kindness and forgiveness. I'm learning to let go of the guilt and the lies we believed. There's another way to live, one that doesn't require us to hate or fear those who are different." I paused, looking at my words. For the first time since my capture, I felt truly free, not from the barbed wire and guards, but from the prison of hatred I'd built in my own mind. I sit at my small desk in the barracks, staring at the newspaper Sergeant Collins brought me earlier. The headlines scream what we've all been whispering about for weeks. Germany has surrendered. My homeland, defeated. But somehow I don't feel the crushing despair I would have expected months ago. Through the window, I watch spring finally claiming victory over the harsh Wisconsin winter. Yellow dandelions push through the muddy ground near our barracks. Stubborn little things, just like hope. Fräulein Schmidt? Sergeant Collins' familiar voice makes me turn. He stands in the doorway, his presence as steady and reassuring as always. May I come in? Of course. I gesture to the spare chair, noticing how naturally this interaction comes now. No tension, no fear, just two humans sharing a moment. I imagine you've seen the news, he says, settling into the chair. Yes. I fold the paper carefully, my hands trembling slightly. I should feel devastated, shouldn't I? But instead, I search for the right words. Like I can finally breathe. He nods, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes losing everything we thought we believed in sets us free. But what will I return to? The question bursts from me before I can stop it. Germany is in ruins, and I'm not the same person who left. The things I've learned here, the way I see the world now. I gesture helplessly. They won't understand. No, he agrees quietly. Many won't, just like many of my own people back home won't understand how a black soldier could treat German prisoners with kindness. His smile is gentle, but tinged with sadness. But that's how change begins, Elsa. One person at a time, carrying new truths into old places. I think about that for a moment. Like seeds, I say, glancing at the dandelions outside. Exactly like seeds. He leans forward. You know, my grandmother used to say that the strongest flowers are the ones that grow through concrete. They prove that life finds a way, no matter how hard the ground. I'm scared, I admit, voicing the fear that's been growing since I saw the headlines. What if I go back and get swept up in bitterness? What if I forget everything I've learned here? Sergeant Collins reaches into his pocket and pulls out something small, a sewing needle, like the one he first used to teach us how to mend our uniforms. Remember this? I take it, feeling its familiar weight. Our first lesson in dignity. And much more than that, he says. It's a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can mend the biggest tears. Keep it. When you doubt yourself, when the world seems too broken to fix, remember that healing starts with simple things. Tears blur my vision as I clutch the needle. All around us, I can hear the other women in their barracks, some crying, some talking quietly about the news. We're all facing the same uncertain future. The war may be over, Sergeant Collins continues, but the real work, the work of rebuilding hearts and minds, that's just beginning. And you're ready for it, Elsa. All of you are. I look at him, this man who showed me that humanity exists even in the darkest places. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you grow. You're not just prisoners anymore. You're proof that people can change, that hate isn't stronger than hope. He stands, straightening his uniform. The future may be uncertain, but it's also full of possibilities. Remember that. I stand at the train platform, clutching my small bag of belongings, mostly items I'd made under Sergeant Collins' patient guidance. The morning air is crisp, and a light fog hangs over Camp McCoy like a farewell veil. My fellow prisoners, now just German women trying to find their way home, huddle together nearby. We're all changed, though some more than others. "Time to board," calls out one of the American soldiers. Not Collins. He said his goodbyes yesterday. I still feel the warmth of his firm handshake, see the quiet dignity in his eyes as he wished me well. The train that will take us to New York, where we'll board a ship back to Germany, waits on the tracks. Its black iron body reminds me of the train that brought us here, but everything else is different. I'm different. Martha touches my arm. Ready, Elsa? I nod, though my heart feels heavy. As ready as I'll ever be. My English has improved these past months, thanks to Collins and the other soldiers. It feels strange now, switching back to German. We climb aboard, finding seats near the window. As the train begins to move, I watch Camp McCoy shrink into the distance. The barbed wire and guard towers that once seemed so threatening now look almost welcoming compared to the uncertainties ahead. What do you think we'll find? Hilda asks softly from across the aisle. Back home? I consider her question carefully. Ruins, I say honestly. Both the kind we can see and the kind we carry inside. My hand absently touches the pocket where I keep the small leather pouch Collins helped me make. Inside are scraps of paper with his teachings, not just about practical skills, but about dignity, about finding strength in the darkest places. The Wisconsin countryside rolls past our window. Fields dusted with the last patches of spring snow give way to forests and small towns. Each mile takes us further from the place where we learned that humanity can survive even the worst of wars. I never thought I'd say this, Martha murmurs, but I'm going to miss them. The Buffalo Soldiers? Collins. She wipes a tear from her cheek. Me too, I admit. They taught us more than just how to survive captivity. They showed us how to live with dignity, even when the world tries to strip it away. The other women nod in agreement. We'd arrived at Camp McCoy as proud Germans, our heads filled with propaganda about American barbarism and racial superiority. We're leaving as different people, humbled, wiser, and strangely hopeful. Looking out the window, I see my reflection overlaid against the passing landscape. The woman staring back at me has the same features as before, but her eyes hold something new. Understanding, perhaps? Or maybe it's just the weight of truth replacing the comfort of lies. It won't be easy, I say, more to myself than the others. Going back, facing what we were part of, what we believed. But we're stronger now, Hilda says firmly, thanks to them. She's right. The skills we learned, the kindness we received, the dignity we were shown. These are not just memories, but tools for rebuilding. Not just buildings and cities, but hearts and minds too. As the train carries us toward the coast, I gaze at the horizon stretching endlessly before us. Somewhere out there lies Germany, a broken nation waiting for its children to return. The thought no longer fills me with dread, but with a quiet determination. The lessons of Camp McCoy and the Buffalo Soldiers travel with me, not in my bag, but in my heart. Simple acts of kindness, the strength found in dignity, the power of seeing beyond prejudice. These are the tools I'll need for the journey ahead. I smooth out the paper on my small desk, my hands trembling slightly as I dip my pen in ink. Through my window, I can see the rebuilding efforts in my hometown, scaffolding and workers trying to piece Germany back together. But my thoughts are far away, back at Camp McCoy. Dear Sergeant Collins, I've started this letter a dozen times, searching for the right words to express what's in my heart. The rebuilding here in Germany is slow, both of our cities and our souls. Every day I use the skills you taught us, not just the practical ones like mending clothes or making do with what we have, but the deeper lessons about dignity and hope. Do you remember that first day in the laundry room when you showed us how to repair our uniforms? I was so full of hatred then, so convinced of lies I'd been taught. But you met my cold stares with patience and kindness. You never once showed anger at our prejudice, even though you had every right to. I think often about our conversations in the camp, especially when you told me about growing up in Georgia, facing discrimination, yet refusing to let it harden your heart. At the time, I couldn't understand how you maintained such grace in the face of injustice. Now I think I'm beginning to learn what you meant about choosing love over bitterness. The skills you taught us, making something useful from scraps, finding beauty in simple things, maintaining dignity even in difficult times. I use them every day. Just yesterday, I taught a group of women in my neighborhood how to turn old clothes into practical items for their homes, just as you showed us. When I demonstrate these techniques, I hear your calm voice in my head, explaining each step with patience. But the most valuable skill you taught me was how to see people as people, not as the labels we put on them. You showed me that true strength lies in compassion, not in hatred. When I think of how I once believed in the Reich's lies about people like you, my heart aches with shame. Yet you never judged us for our past. You only encouraged us to build a better future. The Germany I've returned to is different from the one I left, and I am different too. Sometimes I feel like a stranger in my own land, but then I remember what you said about change being necessary for growth. I'm using my nursing skills again, helping at a local clinic. Every patient I treat, regardless of their background, receives the same care, something I learned from watching how you treated us all with equal respect. There are still those here who cling to the old hatreds, but I stand firm in what I learned at Camp McCoy. When I hear someone speak with prejudice, I think of you and find the courage to speak up. It's not always easy, but I remember how you faced prejudice with dignity and strength. I want you to know that your kindness changed more than just my mind. It transformed my heart. The skills you shared were about more than survival. They were lessons in humanity. The way you chose to treat us with respect, despite everything, showed me what real strength looks like. Sometimes I walk past the ruins of our old beliefs, much like the rubble of our cities, and I feel grateful for the new foundation you helped me build. A foundation based on understanding and compassion rather than fear and hatred. With deepest gratitude and respect, Elsa Schmidt, I fold the letter carefully, sliding it into an envelope. As I write the American address on the front, I wonder if he'll understand just how much he changed me. I seal it with a small prayer of thanks for the man who taught me that the greatest skill of all is learning to see the humanity in others. Through my window, I watch as children play in the streets of Hamburg, their laughter echoing against buildings still marked by war. It's been 5 years since I left Camp McCoy, but the memories remain as clear as yesterday. The letter I'm writing to Sergeant Collins sits half-finished on my desk, next to a small cloth doll he taught me to make during those transformative days. My hands trace the familiar stitches, remembering how his strong fingers guided mine through the motions. "It ain't much," he'd said, "but sometimes the smallest things help us hold on to our humanity." How right he was. I pick up my pen again, the words flowing more easily now. Dear Sergeant Collins, the Germany I returned to was a broken nation, filled with people who, like me, had to face the terrible truth of what we'd believed in. Many still cling to the old hatred, but I think often of your words about healing and forgiveness. Remember how you taught us to make something beautiful from scraps? That lesson went far deeper than needle and thread. Here in Hamburg, I work with other women who survived the war, teaching them the skills you shared with us. But more importantly, I share the truth about what I learned from you and the other Buffalo soldiers. That humanity exists in every person, regardless of their skin color or nationality. Some days are harder than others. When people gather in the market square, I hear whispers of the old ideology trying to take root again. That's when I speak up. I tell them about the Black American soldiers who showed more humanity than those who claim to be our master race. I tell them about you, Sergeant Collins, and how you taught us that true strength lies in kindness. The small garden we've planted behind the women's shelter reminds me of the one you helped us create at Camp McCoy. The vegetables aren't as plentiful, but like you said, anything worth growing takes time and patience. The same is true for healing our hearts. Last week I spoke at a local school. The children asked about my time as a prisoner of war, expecting tales of cruelty. Instead, I told them about the Buffalo Soldiers who taught us dignity through small acts of kindness. I showed them how to make the simple tools you taught us to craft. Their eyes lit up with understanding, the same way mine did when I first saw that the enemy was nothing like what we'd been taught to fear. Sometimes at night I dream of those winter evenings in Wisconsin when you would sit with us after dinner and share stories of Georgia. You helped us see that struggle and pain know no borders, but neither does hope. The guilt I carried then hasn't completely disappeared, but I've learned to use it as you suggested, as fuel for making the world a little better each day. The skills you taught us were never just about survival. They were lessons in humanity, in finding beauty amid destruction, in building bridges where others saw only walls. Each time I teach another woman how to mend a torn piece of clothing or craft something useful from scraps, I'm passing on your legacy of kindness. Your former prisoner, Elsa Schmidt. I fold the letter carefully, sealing it in an envelope addressed to the military post office in Georgia, where Sergeant Collins told us we could reach him. As I walk to the post office, I notice spring flowers pushing through cracks in the war-damaged sidewalk. Like those determined blooms, hope always finds a way to grow, even in the most unlikely places. The community center in Stuttgart was filled to capacity. I stood at the podium, my weathered hands resting on its smooth wood surface, looking out at the sea of faces before me. Young and old, they had come to hear about a different kind of war story, not one of battles won or lost, but of hearts transformed. In 1944, I was a prisoner of war at Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, I began, my voice steady despite the emotions welling up inside me. I arrived there full of hatred and fear, believing everything the Nazi propaganda had taught us about Americans, especially Black Americans. The room fell silent. I could see some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, but I continued. What I found instead at Camp McCoy changed my life forever. The Buffalo Soldiers, that's what they called the all-black 92nd Infantry Division, showed us kindness when we deserved none. My mind drifted back to those first days, and I shared the memory of Sergeant Collins teaching us to mend our uniforms. He could have treated us with contempt, I said. Instead, he taught us skills that gave us dignity. He showed us how to make something beautiful out of what little we had. I pulled out a small cloth pouch from my pocket, one I had made using the techniques Sergeant Collins taught us. This simple skill became more than just sewing. It became a bridge between two worlds that were supposed to hate each other. The audience leaned forward as I described the daily acts of kindness we received, the extra rations, the English lessons, the garden we were allowed to tend. These men who faced discrimination in their own country showed us more humanity than we had shown others during the war. My voice cracked slightly as I recalled the day of the confrontation with the male prisoners. When violence threatened to erupt, we chose to stand with the very men we had been taught to despise. That day, I learned that courage isn't about fighting. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it goes against everything you've been taught. I held up a worn envelope, Sergeant Collins' last letter to me. He wrote to me about healing after the war, about finding strength in forgiveness. His words remind me that the real victory of war isn't in defeating an enemy, but in transforming them into friends. Looking out at the attentive faces, I saw tears in many eyes. Today, as I see conflict still raging in our world, I remember the lessons of Camp McCoy. Change doesn't come from bombs or bullets. It comes from small acts of kindness, from seeing the humanity in those we call enemies. I touched the simple silver cross hanging around my neck, a parting gift from Martha, one of my fellow prisoners who had passed away years ago. We must choose every day between hatred and understanding, between fear and compassion. The Buffalo Soldiers chose compassion, and in doing so, they taught us to do the same. Drawing my speech to a close, I said, "Their kindness didn't just change our lives during the war. It gave us the strength to rebuild ourselves and our country afterward. They showed us that even in the darkest times, humanity can shine through." As I stepped away from the podium, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright with emotion. She couldn't have been more than 20, about the same age I was when I arrived at Camp McCoy. "Frau Schmidt," she said, reaching for my hand, "thank you for sharing your story." The memorial stands before me, its bronze surface catching the morning light. My hands tremble slightly as I hold a single white rose, its petals still damp with dew. The statue of a Buffalo Soldier sits atop his horse, his face etched with determination and dignity, just like I remember Sergeant Collins and his men at Camp McCoy. I take a deep breath, inhaling the crisp morning air. At 83, I've traveled far to be here, both in distance and time. The journey from Germany wasn't easy, but I needed to come. I needed to pay my respects to the men who changed my life forever. Dedicated to the Buffalo Soldiers. I read the inscription aloud, my German accent still present after all these years. My fingers traced the cool metal plaque, touching each letter with reverence. Below are listed the units that served, including the 92nd Infantry Division. Memories flood back, the rattling train to Camp McCoy, my heart full of fear and hatred. How different I was then, so young and foolish, my mind poisoned by lies. I remember the shock of seeing black soldiers in charge of our camp. I remember the way they treated us, with dignity, respect, and kindness we never expected. I close my eyes and see Sergeant Collins demonstrating how to mend uniforms, his strong hands moving with gentle precision. I hear his warm laugh as he taught us to make something beautiful from scraps and leftovers. Such simple acts of kindness that meant everything to us, showing us there was still humanity in a world torn apart by war. "You taught us more than just practical skills," I whisper, bending slowly to place the white rose at the base of the memorial. "You taught us how to be human again." My knees aren't what they used to be, but I manage to kneel beside the flower. Around me, the early morning is quiet except for birdsong and the rustle of leaves. It's peaceful here, a stark contrast to the chaos of war that brought us together. I think about the letter I received from Sergeant Collins years ago, now yellowed with age, but still carefully preserved in my home. He wrote about hope and healing, about building a better world from the ashes of hatred. He was right. Change was possible, even for someone like me who had been so deeply indoctrinated. "We were supposed to be enemies," I say softly, touching the cool bronze again. "Instead, you showed us what true strength looks like, not in cruelty or domination, but in kindness and understanding." Standing up slowly, I brush off my skirt and take a step back to look at the memorial one last time. The morning sun has risen higher now, warming my face. A gentle breeze carries the scent of grass and earth, reminding me of those mornings at Camp McCoy when everything I believed began to change. "Thank you," I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing us a better way." As I turn to leave, my heart feels lighter. The guilt and shame I carried for so many years have been replaced by gratitude and peace. The Buffalo Soldiers didn't just guard us during the war, they guided us toward redemption, showing us that even in the darkest times, light can break through. Walking away from the memorial, I feel complete. The circle that began in fear and hatred has closed in understanding and hope. Sergeant Collins and his men helped me find my way back to humanity, and their legacy lives on in every act of kindness I've tried to pass forward since then. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.